I am Nicole, a 35-year-old woman. My husband, Brian, my mother-in-law, and our 1-year-old son, Ryan, live together. Both of my parents have passed away, and my husband originally came from a single-parent home. When I discovered I was pregnant right after getting married, my mother-in-law suggested that we live together. Nicole, since you don't have parents, you must be anxious about your first time with childcare, right? I will help with the housework and childcare. Why don't we live together? Having always longed for a family, I gratefully accepted her proposal. I used to be an office worker, but upon her advice that it's hard to work with a child, I quit my job. To an outsider, our family must seem very happy. Initially, I was thrilled at the idea of having a new family, but looking back now, it was a huge misunderstanding. Hey, why are you just lazing around at home again? You have me working while you just stay cooped up inside. You're really living the good life, aren't you? Ever since having my son, Brian often lashes out at me like this. At first, my mother-in-law was kind, but gradually she started to constantly nag. Are you still feeling like a guest here? You really are a useless daughter-in-law. It seems like I am just a nuisance to her. Indeed, I do tend to stay at home a lot. However, I began focusing on remote work when my son was around 3 months old, and I am genuinely working hard. Moreover, since I am in charge of both housework and childcare, there is no reason for my husband to complain. However, it seems he has no understanding of remote work. Unfortunately, it appears my mother-in-law shares the same view. They find reasons to belittle my work. Do you know people like you are called useless? Is it called being a shut-in nowadays? Just seeing me open my laptop sets her off. If I try to work in another room, no matter where in the house I am, she quickly spots me and comes over. Are you playing with that toy again? At least make me some tea. Isn't your room cleaning finished yet? She says these things and immediately tries to put me to work. It seems I am no more than a maid to her. Although she doesn't work either, she insists that a daughter-in-law should devote herself to her family. She seemed reasonably happy when my son was born. However, it appears she has lost interest now and no longer wants to be involved with her grandson. To be honest, I don't even like children. They're always so noisy. I can't stand it. He's not cute at all, just like his mother. Despite it being her first grandchild, she heard such cruel words. Now she doesn't even bother to hold my son. If he cries, she looks annoyed and moves away, avoiding him if he approaches. While working, managing household chores, and taking care of my child, I also try to keep everyone in good spirits, keeping me constantly busy. Then one day, just as I had finished work and was preparing dinner, Brian came home unusually early. I put my son to bed and hurriedly cooked. Seeing me, Brian dramatically sighed. Ah, you have it good, don't you? While I'm desperately working for this family, you're just relaxing at home, aren't you? Just cooking, cleaning, and playing with Ryan. That must be nice. His grumbling made me a bit angry. I'm not relaxing at all. I'm doing the housework and childcare, and I'm working properly too. I snapped back a bit strongly. Then Brian burst out laughing and looked at me with a resigned expression. There you go, talking about work again. You know the kind of work you can do from home is pretty limited. It's more like playing than working, isn't it? You really don't understand the real world. If everyone could earn money just by messing around on a computer, then anyone would do it. Hearing this openly mocking comment, my mother-in-law, who was drinking coffee on the side, joined in. Really? How embarrassing. The neighbors also say to me, I see Nicole is always at home. It's worrisome that she stays indoors so much, isn't it? About time she started working. When she mentions the neighborhood gossip, It's probably those chatty ladies she's talking about. They're just as inquisitive as my mother-in-law and love to meddle in other people's family matters. It's so annoying to run into them that I hardly get to enjoy a leisurely walk with my son. I sigh as they said whatever they wanted. Well, you say that, but my son is still young. As I started to speak, my mother-in-law quickly raised her eyebrows. Oh, are you talking back now, generally? You know, doing housework and childcare is a natural part of being a woman. Since you married into this family, it's only natural that you should be able to do at least that much. You're a stay-at-home mom, after all. I'm not just a stay-at-home mom, but it would be pointless to argue that here. Seeing me silent, my mother-in-law seemed to get carried away and continued, Brian, you really chose the wrong partner for marriage. Older women just talk back too much, and to top it off, such a bad personality. I wonder what kind of upbringing her parents gave her. They must have spoiled her rotten. Feeling my face turn red with anger, I couldn't stand it when she insulted my parents too. Don't speak ill of my parents. You never even met them. The words pulled out before I could think. Surprised by my rebuttal, both my mother-in-law and husband looked shocked. It seemed they hadn't expected me to fight back. But Brian quickly regained his composure and glared at me. You shouldn't talk back to my mother, he shouted loudly. Not only did he, but he grabbed a ketchup bottle that was on the table and threw it at me with all his might. Hey, what are you doing? I couldn't dodge in time and got doused with ketchup. Moreover, I was wearing white clothes that day, so it would be difficult to remove the stains. Both my husband and my mother-in-law laughed loudly. I was stunned. I felt so miserable that tears were about to spill from my eyes. Why am I even bothering to cook for these people? And being with such a family couldn't be good for my son either. With that thought, my body moved on its own. I understand. I'm leaving. My declaration didn't seem to surprise my husband or mother-in-law. Is that so? Well then, leave right now. Oh well, if you want to leave, please do. It will be refreshing not to have a noisy kid around. Their blatantly cruel grins left me speechless. I couldn't possibly leave my son with such people. I quickly changed clothes and quietly packed my bags, careful not to wake up my son. Even as I headed to the entrance with my few belongings, my husband and mother-in-law watched without stopping me. I suppose there will be payments and other things to deal with, but please take care of them, I said sarcastically. But my husband looked unconcerned. There's nothing I need from you. Enjoy your homeless life since you probably had nowhere to go, I thought. Unbelievable. I was truly astounded by my husband's response. He probably hadn't even considered what would happen to the house without me. We'll see about that, I said firmly and left the house. I really had nowhere to go, but for the time being, I took my son to a hotel. After a few nights, my friend Anna offered to let me stay in her place, which I gratefully accepted. Anna's house is spacious. Anna has an older daughter who attends kindergarten, and she was thrilled to see my son, exclaiming, "Baby." The whole family was very kind, and despite my sudden visit, no one showed any displeasure. Hearing about my ordeal, Anna became genuinely angry on my behalf. What's with that husband and mother-in-law of yours? They're not family, Nicole. You can stay here as long as you like. Why don't you live with us? Anna said it half-jokingly, trying to cheer me up. To me, her words were so comforting that they brought tears to my eyes. Thank you. I'm happy. I'd love to live with you, but I need to settle down somewhere. I had never been so grateful for remote work. I was able to continue my job without any issues at Anna's house, and I felt more productive than before, perhaps due to being free from stress. 2 months had passed since I started staying at Anna's when I got a call on my cell phone. It was from Brian. Initially, I ignored it, but he persisted with 2, 3 calls, so I reluctantly answered. "Hello, what do you want?" "Hey, haven't you cooled off yet? Why don't you come back? Mom's waiting too." I was astonished by his sudden request, but Brian kept talking non-stop. "Mom's been taking care of the house with work, but it's getting tough on her body, and she can't do it alone. Plus, I miss your cooking. Didn't Ryan miss me yet?" Despite saying they were relieved when the child was gone, now he was using Aaron as an excuse. How selfish can he be? "Don't worry about that. Why don't you order delivery?" I was curt and about to hang up, but Brian persisted. "Please, Mom's been spending so much money that we're barely able to pay the rent. If you manage the household like before, it would be enough. Remember when you handled the finances? We kept living expenses below $1,000, right?" His desperate words made me laugh. Did you really think living expenses were below $1,000? Rent, utilities, groceries, plus the money Brian and his mother wasted, all of it was from the household budget. There was no way $1,000 was enough. I was the one who had been supporting the household's economy, unaware of such details. Brian pressed on. "Come on, you must be struggling without a place to live, right? I'll let you come back under my roof. I forgive you, so come back home." Being told I was forgiven was absorbed, as if I needed his forgiveness. But then I remembered something I had left unknown. I spoke to my husband. "How about we meet and have a talk? How about at the cafe in front of the station next Saturday at 1:00 p.m.? Brian jumped at my suggestion. "Really? Of course. I'll be there. See you then," he said excitedly, and hung up before I could reply. A week later, I left my son with a worried Anna and went to the cafe. When I entered, Brian, who seemed to have been waiting energetically, beamed at me. "Oh, there you are. This way, this way." His voice was cheerful, but he looked somewhat haggard. His clothes were wrinkled and unkempt. Next to my husband, for some reason, my mother-in-law, who wasn't invited, was sitting there smugly, making people wait. What an unpleasant person. If it weren't for Brian wanting to see you, I would have been fine without you. She was as venomous as ever. However, it seemed like Brian, perhaps intending to appease me today, tried to calm his mother. "No, no, Mom. Nickel has been reflecting." He patted her shoulder and then turned back to me. "Nickel, it's been tough for both Mom and me since you left. We really need your help. I don't want Ryan to feel lonely either. It's okay if you come back." Brian spoke as if he were genuinely kind. Inside I was laughing, but I managed to keep a straight face, nodding along with my mother-in-law and Brian. In front of them, I silently presented a piece of paper. They both looked down at it and fell silent for a moment. "Hey, what kind of joke is this?" My mother-in-law scoffed. "It's no joke. Please divorce me. That's why I came here today." I said it cheerfully, with the biggest smile I could muster. What I had presented was a divorce form. Brian stared at the paper as if he might burn a hole through it, but eventually his face began to contort. Suddenly, his calm demeanor flipped completely. He erupted in anger. "There's no way we're getting a divorce. Just when I thought you were being stubborn, you pull something like this." His fury was intense. My mother-in-law, shocked, covered her mouth with her hand, but soon returned to her usual mocking tone. "Nicole, what is this supposed to mean? How much do you want to trouble us, Brian? We should have just left this woman alone." Despite her words, Brian's anger didn't subside. It grew, and he shouted, spitting as he spoke. "Do you have any idea how worried I was when you left? You can't even manage without me, and you pull this stunt. You must be living like a homeless person, right? Where did you leave Ryan? Apologize now, and I'll forgive you." His shouting and banging on the table quieted the entire cafe. I felt the stares of other customers, but I couldn't just stay silent. Taking a deep breath, I addressed my husband. "You're being too loud." "If you were so worried, why did you leave me without contact for 2 months? Ryan is just over a year old, you know." Trying to calm him had no effect as his verbal abuse continued. "You filthy homeless person, acting all high and mighty as if you know the world. It was going nowhere." I sighed and placed another document on the table. "Here, take a look at this." His yelling stopped abruptly when I handed it over. The cover of the document read, "Investigation Results." "Excuse me, but I did a little digging, Brian. It seems you've been getting quite cozy with a young woman, haven't you?" As I spoke, his face drained of color. I had suspected when I left the house that there was another woman involved with my husband. I had hired a detective just in case, and the results were as expected. Brian had been giving me living expenses, but of course they fluctuate month by month. Initially, he managed to provide $1,000, but then it dropped to $800, $600, and even $200 some months. It turned out he was spending most of his salary on his mistress. Bank statements showed charges from fashion websites, jewelry stores, and travel agencies, none of which I recognized. My mother-in-law was also fixated on the documents. She seemed at a loss for words. "Mother," Brian said, "life has been hard because you waste money. Isn't that funny? Well, you do spend freely too." I said it with a laugh, and while my mother-in-law looked at me, she said nothing. She probably knew it was true. Brian, trembling, held the documents and suddenly spoke in a much softer voice. "I'm sorry. I'll break it off with her. So, can you forgive me? You'd be struggling to live without me, wouldn't you?" His bravado was gone, and he looked up at me pleadingly. I felt frustrated by his sudden change of attitude. "Don't you get it yet? There was no way the money you provided as living expenses would suffice all this time." Seeing his unreliable financial support, I had been putting several thousands of dollars into our home every month. My remote work was stock trading. I had dabbled in various investments as a side job before we married, and I had seriously resumed it when our son was around 3 months old. My annual income easily reaches $3 million. If my husband and mother-in-law found out, I could only imagine how they might take advantage of me. I've kept this a secret with all my might, as I've been the undeniable supporter of our lifestyle. Yet the thought of my husband spending his salary on another woman instead of on household expenses makes my blood boil. It hurt to pay for the detective agency, but it wasn't an amount I couldn't afford. Moreover, Brian, if I'm to find out what games you've been playing behind my back, this amount of money is nothing. My desire to teach my husband a lesson was stronger than anything. I explained everything to him and his mother as clearly as I could, and they both seemed unable to believe it. They were visibly unsettled, glancing back and forth between the documents in their hands and my face. Also, I'm not homeless. I've signed a lease, and I plan to move there soon. A spot opened up in the property I've had my eye on for a long time. The security is foolproof, and there's a screening process for tenants, so not just anyone can get in. I'm moving to a mansion that costs $200,000, but it's goodbye forever to you. As I spoke with excitement, my husband and mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. I was really wrong, Nicole. I'm nothing without you. Please remember once we promised each other a future. Please, Nicole, come back. I'll do the housework or anything else instead of you, please." Despite their sudden pleas, my decision was firm. I'd left everything to my lawyer, so please contact him from now on. Goodbye. Ignoring my husband and mother-in-law, clinging to me almost on their knees, I left the cafe. I felt more relieved than I had in a long time as I headed to Anna's house, where my son was waiting. Afterwards, my husband kept fussing, but when my lawyer threatened litigation, he finally agreed to the divorce. I also demanded compensation from my mother-in-law for her numerous mistreatments. Both complain, "How can you earn so much?" But who was it that underestimated me? I didn't care where my husband and mother-in-law ended up. But I recently bumped into the chatty neighborhood ladies. They seemed eager to talk. They gleefully reported the current state of my husband. I thought he would continue having a good time with his mistress in the home I left, but that wasn't the case. The mistress left him once she saw his spending spree. Moreover, the rumor that he was a lousy man who got dumped by his wife and cheated spread quickly at his workplace. He's now working modestly to pay off compensation and his debts. I thought he should be grateful just to be employed, but I kept that to myself. As for the mother-in-law, she's working part-time to pay me compensation and recently fractured a bone during work. She's supposedly rehabilitating, but it's doubtful how much effort my habitually lazy mother-in-law will put in. As for my husband, in addition to his debts, he now has to cover for the compensation of his incapacitated mother. He better do his best. Meanwhile, my son and I moved into our new house. This spacious $200,000 mansion is wonderfully comfortable, and we live there leisurely. The security is solid, so it's safe even with a small child around. Anna and others often come to visit. My son seems more relaxed and laughs more than ever now that he's free from the nagging of my husband and mother-in-law. Once things settle down, I'm thinking of looking for a cute pet to keep my son company.